Humans carve names into metal as if the dead are still listening. I used to call it sentiment. Now I know it's the reason they never lose. So, there I was, standing in the middle of what used to be Forward Operating Base Sentinel, wondering why humans insisted on naming their military installations like they were characters in some ancient epic. Commander Vekrin of the Kalthos Sovereignty, that's me, and I'd seen my share of abandoned outposts across 17 star systems. But this one was different, and not in a good way. The place was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made my auditory receptors twitch, searching for threats that weren't there anymore. Dust had settled over everything like a burial shroud, and the emergency lighting flickered in that annoying way that made you think something was about to jump out at you. Spoiler alert, nothing did. The humans had packed up and left 3 cycles ago, moved on to whatever new war they'd found to throw themselves into. I was there on salvage duty. Exciting, right? My superiors wanted me to catalog anything useful the humans might have left behind. Technology, weapons, tactical data, maybe some of those protein bars they were always eating that smelled like compressed sadness. Standard procedure after our little alliance had run its course. But then I found it. The wall. Now, I'd heard about human memorials before, read about them in the cultural briefings we all had to sit through. Humans form emotional attachments to the deceased, the instructor had droned on. Like that explained anything. They create physical spaces to process grief. Sure, fine. Whatever. Most species had something similar. We Kalthos preferred efficiency. Recycle the biomass, update the personnel records, move on. Clean, simple, logical. This wall, though, this was something else entirely. It stretched across the entire eastern section of the command center, maybe 15 meters wide and 3 meters tall. Every single centimeter was covered in names, thousands of them, carved into metal plates, etched into polymer sheets, scratched into whatever surface the humans could find. Some names were written in careful, precise lettering. Others looked like they'd been gouged in with whatever tool was handy, probably while someone was crying or bleeding or both. I stepped closer, my translator working overtime to process the sheer volume of text. Each name had dates next to it. Birth dates. Death dates. Some had locations. Belkor Prime. The Shroud Nebula. Defensive Station Osiris. Places I recognized. Battles I'd been part of or heard about or tried very hard to forget. And below many of the names in smaller text were little notes. Personal messages. You were the best of us. We came back for you. Your sacrifice meant everything. Not forgotten. Never forgotten. I stood there, staring at this monument to human sentiment, and thought, what kind of species wastes this much time memorializing failure? Turns out I had no idea what I was looking at. Not yet. Let me take you back about 2 standard years back when I still thought I understood how warfare worked. The Vraxian swarm had been tearing through the outer colonies like they were made of tissue paper, and for once the Galactic Council actually managed to agree on something. We were all going to die unless we worked together. Shocking, I know. The Kalthos Sovereignty brought our tactical superiority and advanced weaponry. The Minari contributed their shields. The Torquell provided. Well, honestly, I'm still not sure what the Torquell provided besides complaining, but they showed up. And then there were the humans, the newest species to join the fight, fresh off their little isolated corner of the galaxy. We'd heard rumors, of course. Humans were tough. Humans were crazy. Humans didn't know when to quit. Standard propaganda that every species claimed about themselves. I expected them to be mediocre at best, cannon fodder at worst, another primitive species that would get chewed up and spit out by the Vraxian biotanks within the first week. I met my first human on the surface of Korath 7, during what the tactical computers were calling a minor defensive action. That's military speak for everything's on fire and we're probably going to die, but let's keep morale up, shall we? Her name was Lieutenant Rachel Haynes, and she walked into our command bunker like she owned the place, covered in purple Vraxian blood that definitely wasn't hers, carrying a rifle that looked like someone had welded 3 different weapons together and hoped for the best. She had this scar running down the left side of her face, dark hair pulled back in what I'd later learn humans called a ponytail, and eyes that looked like they'd seen about 1,000 years of bad decisions. "You Vekrin?" she asked, not bothering with any formal greeting protocols. "Commander Vekrin," I corrected. Because rank matters even when you're about to die. Right, Commander. She didn't sound impressed. I'm told you're in charge of the eastern perimeter. We're setting up there. You're setting up where I tell you to set up, I said, pulling up the tactical display. Human forces will take position here, supporting our main defensive line. You'll provide covering fire while we execute the primary. Yeah, no, she actually interrupted me. A commander. We're not doing that. I stared at her. My translator must have malfunctioned. Excuse me? Your plan puts my people in a position where we can't extract if things go sideways, Rachel said, pointing at the hologram with one blood-stained finger. And things always go sideways. We're setting up here instead, with multiple fallback points and clear lines of retreat. Retreat? The word tasted wrong in my mouth. The Kalthos do not plan for retreat. We calculate acceptable loss ratios and execute our objectives. She looked at me like I just suggested we all hold hands and sing songs at the Raxian swarm. Acceptable loss ratios, she repeated slowly. You mean how many of your soldiers you're okay with watching die? It's basic military mathematics. It's basic stupidity. She turned back to the display. Here's what's going to happen, Commander. My people will hold this position, will keep your flanks secure, and when this is over I'm bringing every single one of them home. Not most of them. Not an acceptable percentage. All of them. I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. Lieutenant, that's not how war works. Rachel looked at me then, really looked at me, with those ancient eyes in that young face. She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who'd heard this argument before and was tired of having it. Commander, she said, you have no idea how humans work. She was right about that. I really didn't. The battle for Korath 7 lasted 6 days, which I'm told is approximately 5 days longer than human military doctrine recommends before everything goes completely wrong. Guess what happened on day 6? If you guessed everything went completely wrong, congratulations, you understand warfare better than our tactical computers did. The Vraxian swarm pulled a move we didn't see coming, flanking through a canyon system we'd marked as impassable. Turns out when you're a hive-mind species that doesn't care about individual survival, impassable just means expensive. They hit our southern line like a biological tsunami, all claws and acid and that horrible chittering sound they made that still haunts my sleep cycles. Rachel's platoon was holding a communications relay when the swarm cut them off. 43 humans, surrounded by approximately 800 Vexian warriors, with reinforcements at least 20 minutes out. I watched it happen on the tactical display, those little blue dots representing human soldiers getting swallowed by a sea of red enemy markers. Pull them back, I ordered immediately. Standard protocol. When a position becomes untenable, you retreat, regroup and counterattack from a position of strength. Simple, logical, efficient. Negative, Rachel's voice crackled over the comm. We've got wounded. We're not moving. I checked the casualty reports. 7 injured, 3 critical, 43 soldiers total. The mathematics were simple. Abandon 7 to save 36. Acceptable losses. Anyone with basic tactical training could see that. Lieutenant, you need to evacuate now, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Leave the wounded. We'll retrieve them after we've pushed the swarm back. There was a pause. Then Rachel laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was the kind of laugh that made you check your weapons were loaded. Say that again, Commander, she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I don't think I heard you correctly. Your wounded are slowing you down. Leave them, extract your mobile forces, and… not happening. Lieutenant, be reasonable. 7 lives versus 36 lives. The choice is obvious. You're absolutely right, Commander, Rachel said. I could hear weapons fire in the background, that distinctive crack of human firearms, mixed with Raxian shrieks. The choice is obvious. We're staying. That's when I heard another voice on the comm, younger, female, speaking between ragged breaths. Lieutenant, this is Private Nina Cortez. I'm one of the wounded. Permission to authorize my own abandonment. Sir, ma'am, whatever. I pulled up Nina's file on my secondary screen. 22 years old, which was barely an adult by human standards. Combat medic. 3 months in active service. She'd taken shrapnel to her abdomen when a Vraxian spitter had exploded near her position. Permission denied, Cortez, Rachel said. You know the rules. Ma'am, I'm slowing everyone down. The commander is right, you need to… Cortez. That was a different voice. Older. Rougher. Sergeant Tom Rourke, Rachel's second in command. 15 years of service, veteran of 4 campaigns before this one. Shut up. Nobody's leaving you. But Sarge. Did I stutter, Private? We came here together, we're leaving together. End of discussion. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 3 experienced soldiers, arguing about suicide while death closed in around them. It was madness. Beautiful, stupid, human madness. Lieutenant Haynes, I tried again. You're condemning your entire platoon to death over 7 individuals who are already combat ineffective. This violates every principle of sound military strategy. Commander Veteran, Rachel replied, and I could hear her smiling through the comm static. With all due respect, you can take your sound military strategy and shove it somewhere your exoskeleton doesn't bend. We don't leave our people behind, not today, not ever. That's irrational. Yeah? More weapons fire. Someone screamed. Human voices started shouting coordinates, calling out targets, organizing their defense with the kind of desperate efficiency that only comes when you know you're about to die. Well, we're humans, Commander. Irrational is kind of our thing. You're going to get everyone killed. Probably, Rachel admitted. But at least we'll all go together. Nobody gets left behind to die alone. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. I stared at the tactical display, watching those blue dots hold their ground, forming a defensive circle around their wounded. The red tide was closing in. 20 minutes until reinforcements arrived. They had maybe 5 minutes before they were overrun. They were all going to die, and they knew it, and they were doing it anyway. For 7 people who were already as good as dead. I didn't understand. Not then. But I was about to learn. Here's the thing about humans that nobody tells you in the cultural briefings. When you tell them something is impossible, they take it as a personal challenge. Like the universe just insulted their mother or something. I was still trying to convince Rachel to abandon her position when the human command channel absolutely erupted with voices. And I mean erupted. It sounded like every human soldier within 10 kilometers suddenly decided they needed to talk at once. This is Captain Torres, 2nd Battalion. We're 3 clicks out, we can reach them. 3rd Platoon, checking in. We've got heavy weapons, we're moving. Charlie Company's gunships are inbound, ETA 4 minutes. Someone get me a route through that canyon, I don't care if it's on fire. I watched in absolute horror as the tactical display lit up with human unit markers, all converging on Rachel's position. They were abandoning their assignments, leaving their posts, pulling forces from across the entire southern sector. It was chaos. It was anarchy. It was a complete violation of every military doctrine ever written. What are you doing? I shouted into the command channel. All units, return to your assigned positions immediately. You're creating gaps in our defensive line. Negative, Commander, Captain Torres replied. He sounded calm, almost cheerful. We've got people cut off. We're going to get them. You'll compromise the entire operation. Then I guess you better help us make this quick. And that's how I found myself loading into a human transport gunship, surrounded by soldiers who were grinning like they were heading to some kind of festival instead of certain death. The pilot, a woman with Murphy stenciled on her helmet, was humming something while she ran pre-flight checks. This is insane, I said to nobody in particular. The human sitting next to me, a massive soldier with arms thicker than my torso, just shrugged. Yeah, probably, first time working with humans. How can you be so calm about this? Because, buddy, he said, checking his ammunition with practiced efficiency, those are our people down there. We don't do the math on who's worth saving. Everybody's worth saving. That's the whole point. The flight took 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. I could see the battle below us, tracers lighting up the darkness, explosions painting brief pictures of carnage. Rachel's platoon was still holding, but barely. The Vraxian swarm had them completely surrounded, a writhing mass of alien bodies trying to crush them through sheer numbers. 30 seconds, Murphy shouted from the pilot's seat. It's gonna be hot. Hot was an understatement. We came in low and fast, door guns screaming, rockets turning the swarm into purple mist. 3 more gunships flanked us, and ground forces were pushing in from 2 directions. The humans had mobilized over 200 soldiers for a rescue operation that by any logical analysis wasn't worth the resources. We hit the ground hard. The rear ramp dropped, and the humans poured out like they'd done this 1,000 times. Maybe they had. They moved with this fluid coordination, covering each other, calling out targets, pushing toward Rachel's position with absolute determination. I followed because, well, what else was I going to do? Stay in the gunship. The fighting was brutal. Close quarters, no room for finesse, just raw violence. A Vraxian warrior came at me, and I put 3 plasma rounds into its thorax before it hit the ground. Another one lunged from my left, and the big human from the transport took its head off with a combat knife that looked small in his hands. "Stay close, Commander," he shouted. "Wouldn't want you getting left behind." Was he joking? At a time like this? We reached Rachel's perimeter. Her platoon looked like they'd been through a meat grinder, covered in blood and burns and that purple acid the Vraxians sprayed everywhere. But they were still fighting, still holding that defensive circle around their wounded. Rachel looked up when she saw us, and she actually smiled. "Took you long enough." "Had to stop for coffee," Captain Torres shouted back, his weapon barking as he cut down 3 Vraxians. "Everybody still breathing?" "More or less," Rachel gestured to her wounded. "Cortez needs evac now. Jackson's not far behind." The humans formed a corridor, a living tunnel of bodies and weapons, protecting the wounded as they were carried back to the transports. Nina Cortez was unconscious now, her face pale, being carried by 2 soldiers who moved with careful urgency. Sergeant Tom Rourke was limping badly but refused help, his rifle still tracking targets. I found myself next to Rachel as we fell back, my weapon empty, my entire body shaking from adrenaline. "This was suicide," I said. "You risked 200 soldiers for 43. "Wrong," Rachel said, reloading her rifle without breaking stride. "We risked 200 soldiers for 243, because that's how many soldiers knew that if they went down, we'd come for them too. It's not how you win wars." She looked at me then, really looked at me, while explosions painted shadows across her face. "Commander, we're not trying to win wars. We're trying to bring our people home. There's a difference. But the casualties, the resources, the tactical disadvantage, you still don't get it." She grabbed my arm, pulled me toward the transport. Around us, humans were loading wounded, covering each other, making sure everyone was accounted for. We don't leave people behind because it's efficient. We don't leave people behind because it's logical. We don't leave people behind because the moment we do, the moment we start doing that math, we stop being human. We become just another species that treats people like numbers. The gunship lifted off, overloaded with soldiers, several of them hanging off the sides because there wasn't enough room inside. Below us, the Vraxian swarm was reforming, and our defensive lines were scrambled. We'd created a disaster. We'd saved 43 people, and every single human in that gunship was smiling. I still didn't understand. But I was starting to. The after-action reports made for grim reading. 17 humans killed in the rescue operation, 34 wounded, 12 of them critically. We'd lost 2 gunships, 3 armored vehicles, and burned through enough ammunition to supply a small army for a week. The gaps in our defensive line had allowed the Vraxian swarm to push through in 2 sectors, costing us another 8 hours of fighting to regain lost ground. By Kalthos standards, by any reasonable military analysis, the operation had been a catastrophic failure. I filed my report with exactly that assessment. Flagged the entire incident as a case study in human tactical incompetence. Recommended that future operations with human forces include strict protocols preventing this kind of reckless behavior. My superiors agreed. Sent back a commendation for my clear-headed analysis in the face of human emotional irrationality. That should have been the end of it. But I couldn't stop thinking about Nina Cortez. She'd survived, barely. The human medics had worked on her for 6 hours straight, pulling shrapnel from her abdomen piece by piece, replacing blood faster than she was losing it. I'd watched through the window of their medical bay, fascinated despite myself. Kalthos military medicine was efficient. Stabilize or euthanize, get the soldier back in the fight or recycle the biomass. Clean. Simple. The humans? They fought for her like she was still on the battlefield. Refused to give up even when her vital signs flatlined twice. Brought her back both times through sheer stubborn determination and what I suspected was at least 50% screaming at her to stay with us, damn it. When she finally stabilized, 3 days after the rescue, I visited her. I'm still not sure why. Curiosity. Maybe. Trying to understand what made one barely trained medic worth the lives of 17 experienced soldiers. She was awake, hooked up to more machines than I could identify, looking small and fragile in the hospital bed. Her eyes tracked me as I entered, and she tried to smile, though it came out more like a grimace. "Commander," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Come to tell me I wasn't worth it." I stopped, surprised. "What?" "I heard about the casualties. 17 dead. To save me and 6 others." She looked away. "I did the math, sir. Doesn't add up, does it?" I should have agreed with her. Should have confirmed what my reports had said, what Kalthos doctrine taught, what every tactical computer in the galaxy would calculate. Instead, I found myself asking, what did Lieutenant Haynes say about the math? Nina's laugh turned into a cough that made her wince. "She came by yesterday, told me if she ever heard me doing that kind of math again, she'd finish what the Vraxians started." The smile was real this time. Then she cried. "Didn't think I noticed, but I did." She tried to hide it, but her shoulders were shaking. Why would she cry? Because we lost people getting us out. Jenkins, Rodriguez, Chen, the others. Nina's eyes were wet now too. She knew their families, served with some of them for years, and she's going to have to write letters to every single one explaining why they died, explaining that it was worth it. "Was it?" I asked. I genuinely wanted to know. Nina was quiet for a long moment. Outside, I could hear other wounded soldiers, human voices talking, laughing, some crying. The human medical bay sounded like a community center, not a hospital. They'd brought in personal items, photographs, music players. Soldiers visited each other constantly, telling stories, sharing food, just being present. "You know what Rodriguez said to me?" Nina finally spoke. "Right before we got hit, when everything was going wrong, he said, 'Don't worry, kid. We got you. That's all. Just, we got you.'" She looked at me directly. "He died making sure those words meant something." "Yeah, Commander, it was worth it. Because now I know, and every other human soldier knows. We don't fight alone. We don't die alone. When we fall, someone's going to come get us. That's not a tactic. That's not strategy. That's a promise." I left the medical bay and went to the human section of the morgue. I'd avoided it before, found the whole concept disturbing. Kalthos recycled their dead within hours. The humans? They kept theirs, prepared them for transport back home, held ceremonies. 17 bodies lay in stasis chambers waiting for transport. Each one had personal effects beside them, items their comrades had gathered. Photos, letters, lucky charms, worn books. Jenkins had a stuffed animal, something called a teddy bear, sitting on his chest. Rodriguez had a hand-drawn picture from someone's child labeled "Best Uncle Ever." Chen's chamber had the most visitors. I watched as soldiers came through, one by one, spending a few moments in silence. Some touched the chamber, some saluted, some just stood there, tears running down their faces. One soldier, an older woman with gray hair, knelt beside Chen's chamber and whispered, "We brought them home, David. All of them. Just like you wanted." She placed her hand on the stasis field. "You can rest now." That's when it hit me, really hit me. What the humans had done. They hadn't just rescued 43 soldiers. They'd kept a promise to 17 dead ones. They'd proven that "we got you" meant something, even when it cost everything. And somehow, impossibly, that made them stronger. I went back to my quarters and pulled up my report. Read through my analysis of human tactical incompetence, my recommendation for strict protocols, my neat calculations of acceptable losses versus actual losses. I deleted all of it, started over. Because I was beginning to understand that humans didn't fight wars the way we did. They fought them the way they lived, together, messy, irrational, and absolutely unwilling to leave anyone behind. Even when the math said they should. Especially when the math said they should. So there I was, back in that abandoned command center, staring at the wall, and suddenly it wasn't just a memorial anymore. It was a ledger, a record of every promise kept, every impossible rescue, every time humans chose each other over logic. I started reading the names more carefully, using my translator to pull up the details behind each one. And oh, the stories they told. Private James Okonkwo, died shielding 3 wounded soldiers during the evacuation of Terminus Station. His squad came back for his body under heavy fire. Brought him home. Corporal Lisa Zhang killed holding a choke point so her platoon could extract casualties. They named the choke point after her, still called it Zhang's Stand. Sergeant Michael Torres. Wait. Torres? I pulled up his file. Captain Torres's brother died in the same rescue operation that saved Nina Cortez. The captain had led the mission anyway, knowing his brother was already gone, because there were still people alive who needed saving. Every name was like that. Every single one. Not just deaths, but the stories of who came back for them, who refused to leave them, who kept the promise even when it was insane to try. Then I found the section from Korath 7. 17 names, arranged in a cluster. Jenkins, Rodriguez, Chen. The others who died pulling Rachel's platoon out. Below their names, someone had carved, "They ran toward the fire so others could come home." And right next to that section I found it. Lieutenant Rachel Haynes. My hands, all 4 of them, started shaking. The date was 8 months after Korath 7. Location, Defensive Colony World Petra. She died leading another rescue mission, because of course she had. The details were sparse, but I accessed the military database through my comm unit, pulled up the full report. A human colony transport had been hit, losing power in a decaying orbit. 200 civilians on board, including 73 children. The transport was going to burn up in the atmosphere within 30 minutes. Every calculation said it was impossible to save them. The transport was too damaged, the orbit too degraded, the time too short. Rachel had taken 3 gunships and gone anyway. She'd gotten 194 people off that transport before the hull started breaking apart. Stayed on board coordinating the evacuation until the last possible second. Her gunship had been caught in the debris field during extraction. 40% of her body was burned. She died 3 hours later in medical. Her last words reportedly, "Did we get them all?" They had. 6 people died on that transport, but Rachel and her crew had saved 194. Including 73 children who got to grow up because one stubborn human refused to accept that math said they were already dead. Below her name someone had written, "She taught us that acceptable losses were never acceptable." I stood there, reading and rereading that line, and something cracked in my chest. Not physically, you understand. Kalthos physiology doesn't work that way, but something inside me, some fundamental assumption about how the universe worked, just shattered. All this time, I'd thought the humans were being irrational, emotional, inefficient, letting sentiment override sense, but they weren't. They were building something. Every rescue mission, every impossible extraction, every time they chose each other over tactics, they were reinforcing a promise. They were creating a certainty that every human soldier carried into battle: if you fall, we're coming for you. Not if it's convenient. Not if the math works out. Not if command approves. We're coming. Period. And that certainty, that absolute knowledge that you wouldn't die alone, that your body wouldn't be left to rot on some alien battlefield, that someone would move heaven and earth to bring you home, that made them fearless. That made them fight harder. That made them willing to hold impossible positions, knowing that if they fell, the promise would be kept. The humans hadn't been ignoring military efficiency. They'd found something more powerful than efficiency: absolute trust. The kind of trust you can only build by keeping your promises, even when those promises cost everything. I thought about my own service with the Kalthos military. 47 years, multiple commendations, flawless record. How many soldiers had I served with? How many names could I even remember? We were professionals. We followed doctrine, we calculated acceptable losses and moved on. Had any of them trusted me the way Nina Cortez trusted Rachel? Would any of them have run into fire for me the way those humans ran for each other? The answer sat in my chest like a stone. I kept walking along the wall, reading names, reading stories. Thousands of them. Each one a promise kept, each one proof that when humans said no one left behind, they meant it literally, completely, absolutely. And I finally understood why humans won battles they should have lost. Why they held lines that should have broken. Why other species, stronger species, more advanced species, looked at humanity and felt something that might have been fear, but was probably closer to awe. They fought for each other. Not for territory, not for resources, not for glory, for each other. And that, it turned out, was the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. Who knew? You want to know the real difference between human warfare and everyone else's? It's simple, really. Obvious, once you see it. We were all playing chess while the humans were doing something else entirely. The Kalthos sovereignty, my people. We're brilliant tacticians. Our military doctrine is based on 300 years of accumulated data, refined by the best strategic minds in 7 sectors. We calculate force projections, optimize resource allocation, determine acceptable casualty thresholds. Our battle computers can run 1,000,000 scenarios in seconds, finding the most efficient path to victory. We're so smart, so logical, so efficient. And we lose soldiers at triple the rate humans do. Let me say that again for the people in the back. The primitive species that doesn't have half our technology, that makes decisions based on feelings and promises and irrational loyalty, they bring more of their people home than we do. The Minari collective fights through synchronized neural networks. Perfect coordination, no communication lag, tactical decisions made at the speed of thought. Beautiful to watch, absolutely devastating in execution. Every soldier moving like cells in a single organism. They're perfect. And their soldiers fight with 63% efficiency compared to humans, because when the network takes damage, when soldiers get isolated, they fall apart. They've never had to learn to fight alone, to trust the person next to them, because they've never been individuals. The Torquel Dominion. Don't even get me started on the Torquel. They've got honor codes thicker than their armor plating, rigid hierarchies, centuries of tradition. Very impressive, very orderly. Their military has a 38% desertion rate when casualties exceed projected thresholds, because when the plan falls apart, when the acceptable losses become unacceptable, their soldiers realize they're just numbers in someone else's equation. And then there's humanity. Disorganized emotional, argues about everything, makes terrible strategic decisions based on sentiment rather than sound tactics. Their military doctrine reads like it was written by committee, then edited by that committee's drunk relatives, then translated into 3 different languages and back again. But here's what happens when you put a human soldier in an impossible situation, when you cut them off, surround them, tell them mathematically they cannot win. They fight anyway. Not because they think they can win, not because they've calculated some clever tactical advantage. They fight because they know, absolutely know, that their people are coming for them, that they won't be left behind, that their name won't just become a statistic in some after-action report. And when you have that certainty, that bone-deep knowledge that you're not expendable, that you matter not as a tactical unit but as a person, you fight like you're worth saving. Because you are. The humans figured out something the rest of us missed while we were busy optimizing our kill ratios and calculating acceptable losses. Soldiers fight hardest when they know they're fighting for each other, not for objectives or territory or strategic advantage. When that soldier next to you isn't just another unit marker on a tactical display, but someone whose name you know, whose family you've met, whose bad jokes you've endured for 6 months. Someone worth dying for. Someone who'd die for you. We Kalthos. We lose soldiers and update our tactical databases, calculate what went wrong, adjust our models, move on. Clean, efficient. We learn from our losses. The humans, they carve names into walls, they tell stories, they remember. They make promises to the dead that they keep to the living. And somehow, impossibly, that makes them stronger than all our tactical superiority. I've watched human units hold positions they should have abandoned, win battles they should have lost, survive odds that should have killed them. Every time the analysts would scramble to explain it. Better equipment, lucky circumstances, enemy mistakes. No, it was simpler than that. They stayed because they knew someone would come for them if they fell. They won because they were fighting for the person next to them, not for some distant objective. They survived because survival wasn't just a personal goal, it was a responsibility to everyone who'd promised to bring them home. The Vraxian War lasted 2 years. In that time, the Kalthos sovereignty lost 42% of our deployed forces. The Minari lost 37%. The Torquel lost 51% and had to withdraw entirely. The humans lost 18%. 18. The species that refused to do the math, that made catastrophically inefficient decisions, that valued individual lives over tactical objectives. They brought 82% of their people home, and every single one of that 82% would run back into fire for the 18% they couldn't save. That's the truth about human warfare. That's what I learned staring at that wall. The humans didn't win because they were better soldiers. They won because they were better at being human. And sometimes, apparently, that's enough. I stood in front of that wall for 3 hours, read every name I could reach, every story, every promise kept. My superiors were probably wondering where I was, why my salvage report was delayed. Let them wonder. This was more important. Somewhere in my gear I had a standard issue Kalphos military medal. We give them out for efficiency, for tactical excellence, for exemplary service to the sovereignty. I'd earned 7 of them over my career, kept them in a drawer somewhere, never really looked at them. I took the medal out, held it for a moment, then set it down at the base of the wall. It looked small there, inadequate. A piece of metal trying to mean something in a place where meaning was carved into every surface. "I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner," I said to the wall, to the names, to Rachel and Rodriguez and Chen and all the others. "I thought you were fighting for glory, for victory, for all the reasons the rest of us fight." A human transport was due to arrive in a few hours, final crew to pack up the last equipment. They'd see the wall one last time before forward operating base Sentinel went dark forever. I wondered how many of them would stop, read the names, remember the promises. All of them, probably, because that's what humans do. "You weren't fighting for glory," I continued, my voice echoing in the empty room. "You were fighting for each other, for the chance to bring one more person home, for the promise that no one dies alone. That's not glory." I touched the wall, felt the grooves of the carved names under my palm. That's something better. I turned to leave, my salvage report forgotten. There was nothing here worth taking, nothing that could be catalogued or recycled or repurposed, just names and stories and promises. Just the most important things in the universe, apparently. As I reached the door, I looked back one more time at Rachel's name, remembered her smile in that gunship covered in blood and burns, telling me they weren't trying to win wars. They were trying to bring people home. "Mission accomplished, Lieutenant," I said quietly. "You taught us something we needed to learn." The wall didn't answer, of course. Walls don't. But somewhere, somehow, I think she heard me. And I think she'd be satisfied knowing that at least one stubborn Kalphos finally understood what no one left behind really meant. It wasn't tactics. It wasn't strategy. It was love. And that, as it turns out, was the human's greatest weapon all along.